Timcast IRL will be live in Miami with Patrick Bet David, Donald Trump Jr., Matt Gaetz, and Luke Rudkowski. Join us there. Get your tickets by clicking the link in the description below or by going to timcast.com. We got some big news. This is from timcast.com. Woman who burned down Wyoming abortion clinic, sentenced to 5 years in prison. Laura Roxanne Green was given the minimum possible sentence for the arson. Laura Roxanne Green, 22, a 22-year-old. This is Gen Z. Received the minimum possible sentence for the 2022 arson at Wellspring Health Access in Casper. I'm sorry, man. Look, please. We don't do things like this. You should not do things like this. We are trying to avoid this. We're trying to win through the process by which the founding fathers helped enshrine. I understand a lot of people are like, yo, the founding fathers fought and did a lot of stuff. It's like, dude, they also fought to create a system where we could, with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, solve these problems without having to.
That was the whole point, Tim.
Right.
That was the whole point. They did not want to fight again.
They didn't want to fight in the first place. And
That's right.
Quite literally, the fighting was because they weren't being represented. We now have a crumbling, fractured system, but still an opportunity. It is not impossible. So please, this woman should not have done this. But I bring the story up because I have warned about this. We've seen it before, the attacks on abortion clinics. And we've had the conversation on this show that when you start seeing states say abortion to the point of birth, and other states say no abortion at all, Oklahoma and Colorado, sharing a border, this is an inevitability. Now, again, people should not be doing this, okay? It needs to be handled by a law enforcement arbiter to shut these things down through the vote, and that's what you're getting in the states that are passing the laws, and they're doing it by the book. Let the left overreact and let the law take care of it, because that's the process by which we have agreed we can get these things done. However, it pains me to say, man, I hate to say I told you so. And I think we're going to see worse than this. First of all, she's getting the minimum 5 years in prison for burning down an abortion clinic.
Did she actually burn it down? Did it burn all the way down?
Well, I mean, I would assume if Cassandra wrote it, it burnt down.
Did people get hurt?
But
she'd get murder charges.
Snuck inside
port.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was hurt because that would change. That would change the sentencing guidelines altogether.
Yeah.
So yeah, burning down is a direct statement that means it would totally destroy the building, but I'm not entirely sure.
Burn it into obscurity, into unrecognizability. Yeah. Well, would she have a gas canister or something?
Poured gasoline in this building. So of course, this will also be weaponized by the establishment, by the Democrats in government.
Absolutely.
They'll use this as a tool. They're going to run these commercials in 2024 as why you have to vote for us. They're going to say far-right extremists are doing this, that, or otherwise. My point is not to bring that up. My point is simply to say people are on edge and this stuff is happening.
But there is a better way to deal with this issue. There are very, very strong opinions on both sides, but Republicans are not handling this issue well at all. They're not. And they create, every once in a while there needs to be a release valve in society and public policy. If something's not going your way, unfortunately can lead to stuff like this. Republicans know where they have the country on abortion, and yet they just continuously overreach.
I also want to make sure,
constantly,
because this is not just about Democrats, it's the story here from the Post-Millennial. Leader in Richmond Democrat Party group arrested after posting bomb threat against Andy Ngo and Virginia Talk. There's a big difference between threatening someone and then actually sneaking into a building and setting it on fire. So I want to make sure that's clear. My point for this segment is not to accuse one side of being worse than the other. These are two anecdotes, two extreme instances, but it's worrisome to see these kinds of things happen. There's already heightened political tensions, and now we have, bro, these are young people, and they are just
ruining their lives.
They've lost their minds.
After the
firebomb lawyers in New York.
Mental illness is a big problem, Tim.
After the summer of 2020, I'll accuse one side of being worse than the other side.
No. I agree with that. No, okay. I'm saying right now with these two articles.
Okay.
I'm not here to be like, aha, but look what the left did. No, obviously a threat is not as bad as actually burning a building down. I'm highlighting these things to say there is conflict in this country, and people say things like we're not in a civil war, and it's like civil strife. Stephen Marsh describes it as civil strife. It's the period before Civil War. It's like bleeding Kansas. Perhaps that's where we're at. I think Portland is absolutely in a bleeding Kansas state where businesses are fleeing, flash mobs are destroying everything. Like people are living in fear as crime runs rampant and far left extremists are getting away with whatever they want. Just real quick, Antifa was marching down through the streets with rifles, stopping traffic and controlling vehicles in Portland and in Seattle with Chaz Chop. Like it's happened all over.
You were saying, Rich, about mental health. I fully agree. Mental health is such a problem right now, and the degraded health of the country, the minds of the people. But and earlier we were talking about utilitarianism and how you have to decide as a government, well, how many chickens have to die in order for how many eggs to be laid? Okay. You cannot quantify mental health utilitarianly. It cannot be done. And the government attempting to figure out what's wrong with individuals by making blanket medications is not working. It has not worked. Gun violence has not gone down.
I could not more strongly disagree that the government should be in a position to decide, how many chickens, especially when the chickens are an analogy for human beings. The government is in no position to decide what humans should and should not live. I mean, this goes back to the argument that Tim was having with Sargon the other day about the death penalty and whether or not it's legitimate or not. And that, your opinion on that aside, the government is a result of the consent of the people. The government does not have the right to make decisions about the people. The people make decisions for the government, and this is a fundamental principle of a free society. The government's legitimacy comes from the consent of the governed, and the government does not exist to inform the people how they should think, what they should believe, or how they should organize their lives. Period.
But the problem, and maybe you're right that's ideal, but is that people will have faith in a government to govern people they don't know and that they'll never meet, and they'll send their tax money to that organization.
I was just going to say,
and that government has to make decisions about where's the food going to go this month. Who's going to get it? Who's not going to get it? So that's what I mean by who's going to live, who's going to die.
Yeah, they shouldn't be made. That's what a market is for. That's why we have. Yeah. That's why the government shouldn't be involved in markets.
But then you get a individual business leader deciding, like Vanderbilt,
who
shut off the trains to New York City.
No, look at all the. I mean, right now you're talking about who's going to get food and stuff. Grocery stores are all over the country. People can decide where to go on their own, and we don't need the government to tell us how to live our lives.
But back before 1860, Vanderbilt, he owned all the trains in the country. Basically, he ran the country. Arguably, he's the man who built America, Vanderbilt. And he decided one day he didn't like the way they were treating him, so he cut off access to New York City. He's like, no, you're not getting trains in New York City anymore. Nice. Until you meet my demands. And we realize how dangerous it is to let the private sector run.
I completely disagree. Totally disagree with your perspective. And it is and if you empower the government to do those things, then you are empowering the government to decide who lives and who dies, who eats and who does not eat. And any government in history that has had that power has abused it, and it turns into piles and piles and piles of dead human beings.
Let me just, because you haven't gone so far as to really argue the point of a modern Democrat, but what you guys are arguing is a modern Democrat would say, but the government is the people. And you hear AOC actually say this all the time. But
absolutely not.
And I agree with you, right? And I would say, in response to what you're talking about, because I get it, the Gilded Era, I get it. I would rather deal with the Guild than a government. That's just the way that's where I'm at. The government has unlimited power to coerce you, to hurt you, there's never going to be a guy who's so rich he's going to be more powerful than the Central Intelligence Agency or the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I mean, well, not in this society. Maybe not in a true
Saudi Arabia
market
or something.
But they're not a true market. If we stuck, to our original, if we stuck to our original design, I don't know why they named it this now, but as I did work on this for a book, they called it virtue capitalism. Like somewhere along the lines, we need to re-emphasize some virtues that are about capitalism. And to me, and it's like, have you read Max Weber, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism? Mm-hmm. That's not capitalism. So the pursuit of greed for greed's sake has been around since antiquity.
Yeah, and communism too.
That's exactly right. It's everywhere. It has nothing to do. All right. So when you hear AOC make those points, it's like, well, that's not what capitalism is at its
Exactly.
core.
Exactly.
And again, I'd rather deal with a greedy fat cat, who's got competition with monopoly laws, anti-monopoly laws, things like that, than a government. Because somewhere along the line, Democrats started to believe what he was arguing against.
But you need the government to enforce the monopoly laws.
That's true. But we're not talking about to the point of that. That's different. You have a justice system for that. That's within reason. We're not talking about the ability to chop up all parts of society.
I don't believe the United States could be communist. That's why one of the reasons I think we're winning. I think we can see communist influence, but the backlash that we're seeing in response to a lot of this stuff is the natural reaction.
I don't know about never, but not now.
I think never.
You think never? Never say never.
I mean, well, like let's be realistic. Nothing's absolute, right? For all we know, like a plague hits, wipes out most of the population, and then a new civilization emerges, calling itself the United States. Yeah, there's a lot of circumstances. I'm saying, based on the current iteration of our government and our culture today, the systems that we have in place, in all likelihood, will not.
Right.
What about fascist? See, I never liked when the right always said, Obama's a socialist, he's a fascist.
So
I think we're all
communist.
fascists. The system's
issue
fascist
is,
with the Federal Reserve.
If you look at the Soviet Union, if you look at communist China, we may get civil war, but I do not think we would get. A lot of people will say, like, is it a civil war or is it a communist revolution? And we'll interchange. But let me break this down and clarify. When I'm talking to my friend, I was visiting Ukraine, covering some stories there. And the apartment where we stayed used to be Soviet communist block housing. And she explained how the apartment she was in back in the day, the two neighbors hated each other. And so one neighbor called the secret police and said they were speaking bad about the party. The next day, the apartment was cleared out. Everything was gone. That's it. Neighbor taken care of. That might happen in U.S. cities. But I do not believe that if the United States ever went to that degree of authoritarian, it would be ubiquitous outside of cities. For example, when they did all the COVID lockdowns, in most red areas, nobody did anything.
Even when they had those rules, a lot of them didn't.
They don't have the means to enforce it. Yeah. And when people are living successfully out in the middle of nowhere, they're just going to do whatever they want for the most part. And they do. There are parts of West Virginia where it's like, sure, you're supposed to get a permit for that. And then people build whatever they want and everyone just rolls their eyes. Because, like, what are you going to do? You're 70 miles from the nearest town. Yeah. This is one of the things that affected West Virginia when it came to this gun bill that the Democrats wanted to do, where it was like you had to go, all gun transfers must be through FFLs. Because some guy pointed out that he's in rural West Virginia with like really crappy internet. And the nearest FFL is like 2 or 3 hours away. If he needs to give a shotgun to his cousin who lives down the road so his cousin can deal with like some raccoon problem or something because of his chickens, he's going to drive 3 hours with his cousin to go fill out paperwork. That's insane. Yeah. And so that stuff does not work. And so there's a lot of things that are federally restricted that are not like, look, I'm not talking about drug deals. I'm talking about there are laws pertaining to gun sales, and there are people who live in the middle of nowhere who they're not going to tell you, but they don't follow any of those laws, and no one knows and no one cares, and it will not be enforced. Mm-hmm. No ATF guy is going to drive out to a trailer 300 miles from the nearest town for a guy who lives on 200, 300 acres of worthless property where he just entertains himself and minds his own business, and then bought a gun from his neighbor for a couple $100 with that private sale. They're not going to drive out there for that. I mean, they might, but for the most part, it's just off the grid and they can't even find it if they wanted to. Yeah. When it comes to the overt communist stuff, there's not enough federal law enforcement to deal with the size of this country. If they tried to be a secret police that were going and erasing people for speaking bad about the party. In cities, no question. In cities, we already watched people in Staten Island get arrested because they were saying, hey, don't bring these non-citizens into our neighborhood. Yeah. If you live in Staten Island, you're a subject, okay? Yeah. You're not a citizen. You're a subject. Yeah. For those of us that don't live in these big cities, well, for the time being, we still have our freedoms and we are not subjects.
Subject only to the U.S. dollar. Well,
but
kind of.
Not even. I mean, some people are trading with all sorts of things, especially in the middle of nowhere.
That's cool.
But my point is this. I'm not saying they won't try, but they will not be. The amount of force you would need to maintain full-scale authoritarian communist control over a country like this. Yeah. The issue here is people here are just obstinate.
It's hard, but I agree. It would be hard, but both China and the Soviet Union were both massive massive
thinking
countries.
long and hard
so it's
about
not
this,
that it's not that I don't think that you're right about the fact that it would be tough, but I think that what happens is you get violent the government coming down violently with the boot, and then it scares people into compliance.
Right. So the issue is China has a history of dynasties. Mm-hmm. Russia has monarchs. The United States has fractured colonies struggling to agree with each other who are in revolt. First, the people who came to the United States from Europe were people who are willing to die to get away from whatever was going on in their home country. Quite literally, like you're in the UK and you're like, this sucks. Can't practice my no freedom of religion. I don't want to be here. Hey, if you get on this boat and ride for 3 months with a 20% chance of dying, you might make it to a barren shore. And they were like, sign me up. Yeah. And I'm like, wow. As an alternative to conflict within your country, escape was an option. They took it. The United States then is bred of people who want to be left alone. And it's like, I would
still isn't our identity. You're right. Because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, but look at how people have changed. Are we still largely that?
But look at it this way. Take a small cellular culture of angry people who say, don't tread on me, and then put a few drops in a big petri dish. Contagion. And then watch over a month as that whole thing spreads, and you can see it is of the same culture. There's mutations, there's changes. Some other cells have creeped into the petri dish, but it still overwhelmingly is this one type. And it just so happens this cell is resistant to a certain virus. That is in our blood as Americans, which is why I would not be surprised if the immigration problem is intentional to destroy
us.
To bring in as many people as possible who are not of the pioneer don't tread on me ethos, but they're trying to get as many people in this country who are of the ethos of gimme, gimme, gimme. I will take what I want. Then it's very easy to control people when you give them what they want. To quote Fast and the Furious 4, when the villain says, he says, give the people something that they fear losing and you can control them. Well, there you go.
Well, there's only one reason why Mayorkas would threaten Cubans who are coming 90 miles, on a raft or a boat. He'll threaten to open fire on them, right? But he'll let anybody pour through the southern border from certain countries that he particularly wants.
It is a lot
and
of
even
Venezuelans
though, too.
Yeah, so Venezuelans and Cubans.
It's hard, though. It's hard to separate Venezuelans, from the rest of the pack.
It is. Cubans on a boat, and a lot of people from Honduras. And the sentiment among most of these migrants is they want a better life. And I get that. The American ethos was also very similar, but the thing about the people who came here is, and there's an overlap, which is why I say I respect the people who are coming here, because they're willing to risk death. For the most part, they're getting funding. There's stories about NGOs paying their bills. Oh, sure. This is very, very different.
Big business.
You weren't landing on a barren shore. The colonists were like, we're going to land on a shore. It's going to be hard work. And when the winter comes, you're probably going to die then too. Life is rough. Yeah. The people who are coming here are like, once you get here, you are going to live in luxury compared to where you came from. So there's an inversion as to what the what the drive is. My point ultimately is this nation is born and bred of people who are really angry and want to be left alone to the point where they are willing to die to be left alone, which means, look, man, that the feds raided that fat old dude's house because he was smack talking on the internet and they killed him. That doesn't stop. If the country does go full commie, tanky, whatever, cities will be bad and they will try to enforce things outside of cities. But what I think is more likely to happen is that cities will be barred from leaving. People will,
that's what I think.
They'll have checkpoints around the cities. There's a bunch of sci-fi movies and novels that are like this, where the people who live in the cities, very technologically advanced, very comfortable, but you're not allowed to leave. And the people from outside the cities need special permits to come into the cities and get permission.
There's like a trilogy I'm thinking of right now, because I've thought the same thing, that you're just not going to be able to go. And they'll try to make it as super cushy and comfortable for you, even though it is draconian. What is the name of these trilogies?
They wouldn't let the serfs leave the land.
But there will be.
My wife's going to kill me for not remembering.
You'll remember.
There will be backwater rural folk who are surviving on their own and living just fine. And you go to a city and they're going to stop you and be like, "Do you have your permit? Yeah. Do you have your social ID?"
And there'll be stories. You know what's over that wall?
You see light shows and stuff.
Like the line. They're doing this in Saudi Arabia. The line. That city where they want to build it. That's right.
Dude, I got
Divergent. diversion.
But in
even though that was an experiment, but I'm saying,
right.
they
And
didn't know.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.